Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim Defede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim Defede. Later in the show, we will answer that age-old question, where in the world will Marco Rubio be on Tuesday morning? And here's a hint. It won't be in the White House Situation Room or shuttling between European and Middle East capitals. Nope. Instead, he'll be in a federal courtroom in downtown Miami, testifying in the criminal trial of his longtime friend, former Miami Congressman David Rivera. I'll explain why later. But we begin today's show with Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the war with Iran. In addition to the 13 members of the U.S. military who have been killed so far, and the more than 200 servicemen and women who have been wounded, the first 3 weeks of the war is estimated to have cost the U.S. taxpayers nearly $25 billion. And although Donald Trump keeps saying we have already won the war, he is requesting an additional $200 billion in funding for the Pentagon. Here is what Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had to say about that request.
Well, as far as $200 billion, I think that number could move, obviously. It takes money to kill bad guys.
Something else that costs money? Healthcare for Americans. To put that $200 billion Pentagon request into context, the cost of extending the Obamacare healthcare subsidies that helped millions of Americans afford health insurance and that Republicans in the House and Senate refused to fund this year, well, that was only $30 billion. But I digress. When I spoke to Wasserman Schultz, I asked if she would support the request for $200 billion to continue the war.
I want to make sure our military has the resources they need when they're trying to keep us safe. But I also need to understand what the objectives are, what's the plan for execution, what are they using those resources for, and be able to make sure that it's clear the direction that we're headed and how we're going to get there.
But you can see how people may say that he's basically doing this backwards, prosecuting the war and then coming to you for the money later, and that if you go ahead and approve a supplemental of $200 billion, you are essentially then authorizing him to prosecute this war without ever having gone to Congress to begin with or build an alliance with our allies to make sure that this could get done properly. How concerning of that is that anything you do to support a supplemental will be seen as agreement with the war?
Well, I think he absolutely has done it backwards. I mean, he should have come to Congress. He should have had clear objectives. He certainly has been prosecuting a war, even though they were kind of all over the map initially on, it's an excursion, it's a military engagement, it's a war. I mean, there's no question about it. We've lost 13 service members, over 200 injured, more to come, and the massive military impacts across the region are significant. I will expect if they're going to make an ask like that, in the $100 to $200 billion range, the administration has to come to Congress. I am someone who said they were really off the mark and off base not to come to the Congress with an authorization for use of military force. I mean, I believe that Iran is the worst terrorist threat and the most dangerous country on the planet. Had I heard a rational explanation, it is quite possible that I would vote for an AUMF. But they have chaotically executed this war. Gas prices in Florida are, this is Thursday, are nearing $4, could be over $4 by the time this airs. And diesel per gallon being $5 is the seriously economically impactful.
Did Israel lead us into this war? You talk about how chaotic it now seems to be, the prosecution of it. Did Netanyahu essentially bamboozle Donald Trump into a war with Iran, which is something that he's wanted for a long time?
It is so incredibly dangerous to lay this at the feet of the leader of another country. Israel is the United States' closest ally in the region. We closely coordinate on intelligence and military activity, but it is dangerous, particularly for Jews around the world, as we've seen with the Temple Israel attack and the attack in Austin, to start pointing blame at Jews and at Israel for the decision that President Trump made to attack Iran. He went into Iran in what seems to be a not very well thought out way. He should have come to Congress. The chaos and the way it's being executed, the blame, we cannot let Donald Trump off the hook. Any blame for how things are going right now is at his feet and on his head.
I agree with you. I agree with you that I understand the danger inherent in it and the rise of anti-Semitic propaganda, anti-Semitic attacks. But there's also wanting to understand the truth of how we got into a war. And whether it's dangerous to have the conversation or not, do you not worry and are you not concerned? Senator Rubio or the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the president, others have seemed to say that this was a war of choice by the Israelis that we then ended up having to support and go along with out of fear that Iran would have attacked us once Israel made the decision to go forward.
Any concern or blame for the reason that we launched an attack against Iran lies at the feet of our president. He is making these decisions. The fact that the administration and our Secretary of State tried to, and the president tried to blame Israel for the reason that they had to attack, is outrageous and cowardly and dangerous. Any action, military action that we take as a country, the president is the commander in chief. The blame and the responsibility and the accountability lies at his feet.
I want to get to DHS shutdown and Cuba, but I do want to talk a little bit about the rise of anti-Semitism. In part, I think there is some credible evidence that the way this war has unfolded has led significantly to that, but there were other issues that have come up. We see that the University of Florida College Republican chapter is being disbanded because of anti-Semitic material and Nazi salutes that the head of it were doing. The FIU chapter of TPUSA and the Republicans here expressing virulent views in a group chat setting. All of this, involving a lot of young men, apparently, in the magosphere. And add to that, I will just throw in a character like James Fishback, who is running for governor in the state of Florida and is actually outpolling the sitting lieutenant governor right now. Granted, James Fishback is only in single digits, but he's running a campaign targeting young men in particular with racist and anti-Semitic tropes. Where do you see the state of things, both in terms of what's happening at UF, at FIU, and with Fishback's candidacy?
Jim, there is serious rot in anti-Semitic and racist, bigoted rot in the next generation of the Republican Party that they appear to be doing little to nothing about. You don't even have most of the leadership of the Republicans condemning the actions, the comments. They aren't doing enough to disband these organizations. I'm glad UF is dismantling the UF College Republicans. There's a lawsuit that's taking place now. This is all the FIU incident went on. The text chain went on for months. Horrific, anti-Semitic, back and forth, misogynistic, racist commentary, where we see significant racism and anti-Semitism, and we have it on the left. We have the concern on the left too. We need to take steps to make sure that we can educate and bring together unity in the next generation. The Republicans don't appear to be making any effort because they benefit from the motivation of that generation, and they are engaged, and they don't want to discourage their engagement. That's not acceptable.
I do want to turn to DHS. We are seeing long lines for TSA agents at airports. Also, just on the broader field, having the Department of Homeland Security not funded while we're in the midst of a war with Iran seems counterintuitive.
It is Republicans that are keeping the Department of Homeland Security closed. CBP and ICE have $150 billion. They have enough funding until 28 or 29 from the one big ugly law they passed last year. And the reason that the Department of Homeland Security is closed is because the Republicans refuse to do a few basic things that the overwhelming majority of Americans support. They refuse to ensure that when they are detaining an undocumented immigrant, that they have to get a judicial warrant, that they can't just bust down people's doors and do illegal search and seizure. That's unconstitutional in this country. The masks need to come off. The name tags need to go on, and we need to make sure that ICE is functioning like a regular law enforcement agency and not, running roughshod over the public. They're stopping lawn trucks in Davie and Cooper City and Southwest Ranches, indiscriminately. I mean, they're targeting people based on their looks and their accent. We need reforms.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. Democrats have successfully raised the profile so that Kristi Noem, the DHS secretary, was fired. The pending DHS secretary, Mark Wayne Mullen, has testified at the Senate confirmation hearing that he would move forward and only use judicial warrants before entering a home, that he would reverse what had been the policy before. Can you not accept a win and move forward, or do you risk losing it? Because if there is an act of domestic violence or domestic terror in the United States, do Democrats risk being blamed for it?
Jim, I'm a show me person, not a tell me person. What matters is what's codified into the statutes. So I'm glad that Mark Wayne Mullen committed to using judicial warrants to detain undocumented immigrants. That makes it much easier to wrap up this compromise, put it into the statute. Let's ensure that that's the law and it has to be followed. Let's make sure that ICE actually beefs up their training because it was woefully inadequate and pathetic. Very simple. Take the masks off, put the name tags on so that people know who it is, that they can face their accusers.
I want to turn to Cuba. Donald Trump has been making a lot of statements basically saying that he feels free to just take Cuba. I'm not sure what that means exactly. I know that there have been some negotiations that are taking place. They seem to be both up and down at different times. When you hear the president talking about taking Cuba and part of a sort of an overall strategy, first Venezuela, Iran, next Cuba, legacy building for the president, what is your thoughts as to how we're approaching this change in Cuba?
Well, I've fought side by side, as you know, with my Cuban-American colleagues for a free Cuba, for free and fair elections, for the release of political prisoners, for the ability for Cubans on the island to express themselves freely, economic reforms that ensure that we eradicate communism on that island. I am a firm anti-communist, but for Donald Trump to say that he could do whatever he wants with Cuba, for him to actually have his Secretary of State and other leaders in his administration negotiating to simply remove Diaz-Canel, who is basically the Castro regime's puppet, and leave the regime in place, and basically make it so that Cuba is in economic servitude to Donald Trump's billionaire cronies in the United States. That's an unacceptable outcome. The Cuban people on the island, Cuban Americans in exile, absolutely want to truly be free. And we should be making sure that any negotiations that take place, the only acceptable outcome is true freedom and a full removal of the regime and an end to communist rule there.
So the notion that Marco Rubio has met with the grandson of Raul Castro and possibly trying to find his own version of Delcy Rodriguez for Cuba, you think that's unacceptable?
To replicate what's going on in Venezuela, where we removed Maduro as the head of the serpent, only to replace it with his chief torturer, with Delcy Rodriguez, and leaving that regime in place, no pathway to democracy. I mean, some political prisoners released, but essentially making Venezuela in service to our oil barons and oil billionaires. That is not the model that would be at all acceptable 90 miles from our coastline, where we have generations of Cuban Americans who have fought relentlessly to ensure that their island can be released from the shackles of the communist regime. And Donald Trump just thinks he can do whatever he wants and is cavalier about whether or not we're just going to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic and call it a day. That would be an outrageous, unacceptable, disrespectful outcome to the generations of exiles who have been yearning for freedom on the island, and to the Cubans there who deserve it.
When we come back, just when Marco Rubio thought he was done with crazy Miami politics, well, they're pulling him back in. Stay with us.